and look closely at this photograph. Pay attention, but not to the couple seated in the center, dressed in their Sunday best. The man with his collar so stiff it seems to hold his chin at a careful angle of practiced dignity. The woman beside him with her hands folded so neatly in her lap that the gesture feels less like rest and more like prayer. Do not focus on the younger children sitting at their feet, or the teenage girl standing to the left with a ribbon in her hair tied so carefully it must have taken someone a long time and much love to get it right. Look instead at the boy in the back. He stands slightly behind the others, half hidden in the shadow of the studio curtain. His face is turned at an angle that photographers of that time would have called imperfect. For 114 years, everyone who ever saw this image, and the number who truly looked can probably be counted on one hand, saw only a family. A Black American family photographed somewhere in the American South in the early 20th century. A portrait of ordinary life, they would say, a moment of togetherness frozen in silver and shadow. But the boy in the back is wearing something around his left wrist, and it is not a bracelet, it is not a decorative cuff. Once you understand what it really is, the word ordinary will never again fit this image. And this is the story of how one historian, chasing a small detail that everyone else missed, pulled on a single thread and uncovered a secret that a family had carried quietly and at great cost for more than a century. Dr. Maya Richardson was not having a special Tuesday when she first saw the photograph. It was the third week of February, the kind of cold Boston morning that makes you regret every choice that brought you there. The chill pressed through the stone walls of the Massachusetts Historical Society's research annex. Maya was 38 years old, a specialist in post-Reconstruction African American history. She spent her days studying objects and images that had been ignored or undervalued by those who claimed to preserve the past. She had written 3 papers and 1 book on domestic labor in the Jim Crow South. She had learned to move through archives slowly, carefully, always watching for something that did not belong. She was working through a donation of uncatalogued materials that had arrived 18 months earlier from a family in Maryland. Most of the collection was ordinary, but there was one box marked photographs in red ink that no one had yet examined. Maya pulled the box from the shelf herself. Inside, each photo was protected by acid-free tissue. There were 11 photographs in total, and she looked through the first 7 quickly: pictures of buildings, a church, a general store, and a few individual portraits. Each carried the stamp of Callaway and Sons Portrait Studio in Macon, Georgia, established in 1901. Then she reached the 8th photograph. She almost passed over it. The composition was crowded and slightly overexposed on one side. The studio curtain had a small tear in the top right corner. The family was posed in the usual way, seated elders in the center, children arranged by height around them. 5 or 6 people were visible. The boy in the back was partly hidden. Maya set it aside at first, but something made her return to it later. She could not explain exactly why. In the paper she later wrote, she called it a compositional irregularity. In private, she admitted it felt like the photograph was asking her to look again. That same afternoon, she took the image to the Society's imaging suite. The scanner could capture 1200 dpi resolution. She placed the photograph on the glass and waited. When the file appeared on her screen, she zoomed in on the boy in the back. Her hand froze. Around his left wrist, half hidden by shadow and the angle of his arm, was a heavy metal ring attached to a short chain. The other end of the chain disappeared behind the person standing in front of him. It was a shackle, and the studio stamp on the back of the photo read 1916, 51 years after the 13th Amendment had abolished slavery. Yet this boy, who looked no older than 12, stood in a family portrait wearing a shackle. Maya sat still for a long time. Then she began making calls. If stories like this move you, if you want to know what history has hidden in plain sight, please subscribe and hit the like button now. We are only at the beginning of what this photograph holds. The first person she called was her former dissertation advisor, Dr. Charles Okafor, a 71-year-old historian at Howard University. She sent him the high-resolution scan with the boy's wrist highlighted. She wrote, "Tell me I am not seeing what I think I am seeing." His reply came late that night. He told her she was seeing exactly what she thought. The object on the boy's wrist matched restraints used in Georgia's convict leasing system between 1908 and 1922. He advised her to check Bibb County records and to be careful. because this was not just history, it was someone's family. Maya booked a train to Washington, D.C., and spent days at the National Archives. She studied the convict leasing system. The 13th Amendment had ended slavery except as a punishment for crime. That small exception became a wide door. Men and boys could be arrested for minor things like vagrancy or loitering, quickly convicted, and leased to private companies for hard labor. The state made money. The workers received nothing. Using the Georgia archives, she searched convict lease records for boys under 16 between 1913 and 1917. She found 43 names. On the 27th entry, she stopped. Elias Beaumont Calhoun, age 11. Convicted in October 1914 for theft of property worth less than $1. Sentenced to 3 years hard labor and leased to a turpentine camp in Twiggs County, Georgia. The 1910 census matched perfectly. He was the youngest son of Solomon and Ida Calhoun. Maya zoomed in again on the boy's face in the photograph. His jaw was set. His eyes looked slightly above the camera. His left hand, the one attached to the shackled wrist, rested lightly against his mother's back. It was the gentlest touch, as if he was memorizing the feel of her through his fingertips. She now had a name and a story, but she wanted to know what happened next. She began searching for living descendants. She contacted Black Baptist churches in central Georgia because they kept careful membership records. The archivist found Solomon and Ida Calhoun as members of First Missionary Baptist Church in Jeffersonville, Twiggs County. She also found a record showing Elias B. Calhoun joined the same church as an adult in 1921. Had come home. Maya continued tracing the family through census records, marriage certificates, and migration patterns. Elias married Rosie Pearl Hodges in 1924. They had 5 children. One daughter, Cora Ella Calhoun, born in 1929, moved to Chicago during the Great Migration. Cora's son Marcus had a daughter named Gloria Ann Washington Pruitt, who now lived in Memphis, Tennessee. Maya carefully wrote to Gloria and explained her research. Gloria replied quickly and invited her to visit. When Maya arrived in Memphis, the resemblance between Gloria and the boy in the 1916 photograph was striking. They sat at Gloria's kitchen table for hours. Maya laid out all the documents in the photograph. Gloria looked at the image of her great-grandfather Elias as a child in shackles and showed no surprise, only quiet recognition. Gloria told Maya that her grandmother Cora used to say her father had 2 lives, the life before and the life after. He never spoke much about the years in between, but he told Cora one thing she made sure her children remembered. The day they took that photograph was the only day in 3 years he was allowed to touch his mother. On the long train ride back to the camp, he tried to remember exactly how her dress felt under his hand so he would not forget. Then Gloria brought out a small old cedar box. Inside were 2 objects wrapped in aged fabric, and one was a small brass key with a hand-filed notch, the kind used for shackles. The other was a small rectangle of dark blue cotton cloth cut from a dress. In one corner, carefully stitched, were the initials IMC Ida Mae Calhoun. Gloria explained that Elias had come home 8 months early. No one ever asked how. The family simply accepted the quiet miracle and protected the memory. 14 months after Maya first scanned the photograph in Boston, an exhibition opened at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The centerpiece was a large print of the 1916 Calhoun family portrait, with the detail of the shackle clearly visible. Beside it, in a glass case, were the cedar box, the brass key, and the piece of Ida's dress. Gloria had donated all 3 items to the museum. At the opening, Gloria stood with her family in front of the photograph. Her 14-year-old granddaughter Amara asked what the boy in the back was feeling when the picture was taken. Gloria replied softly, he was remembering. He was making sure he would never forget that moment, so that no matter what came next, he would still have it. The original 1916 photograph now hangs permanently in the museum. Elias Beaumont Calhoun lived until 1971. He raised a family and lived a quiet, determined life. He left no public speeches or memoirs about those years, and left only his face in that photograph, the brass key, the piece of his mother's dress, and the memory passed down through generations of women who refused to let the story disappear. History is not always written in grand events. It is written in small, powerful details, the weight of a hand resting on a mother's back, the careful stitching of initials on cloth, and the decision to keep a simple cedar box safe across 100 years and many miles. Look closely at this photograph. There is always more to see. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments what you think Elias would want us to understand today. Subscribe if you want to keep discovering these hidden stories from our past, because there are thousands of photographs like this one still waiting for someone to look closely enough.